an escalator.
That's an S.
Yeah.
And then number 5, is that, what is that? Is that
Number 5, that's an elevator.
move?
Yeah, it
That's
moves.
an L.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so you want, I think that's good. Okay.
That's better.
That's not,
Sorry.
yeah, that was very good when it was larger. Thank you.
Okay. So,
Keep going.
okay, these are my models. This is the Brides building here. It's, you know, I guess partially trying to represent large glass and Maison de Verre with the glass front, and then that's the pod. This is the bachelor's building. It's located in the desert, and there's a big ravine through the middle of it. And this is a side view of the two buildings facing each other. That's just a close-up on the bridge. The bridge extended and the pod coming out. Just an aerial view of it. And that's just the pod coming onto the platform. So that's the end.
Could you a little bit, the pod, I don't understand, sorry, how that works.
Sure.
Or maybe pick another number drawing is fine. Whatever.
Okay. Basically, just building on the idea of the mechanical invention, it's a room, I think it's kind of like a room within the room, and it detaches from it and comes out.
So is that number 4? So is number 4 the pod? Oh, I see.
That's
launch pod.
yeah, number 4, yeah.
So in your model, you have a different shape than the rectangular one. It's unclear to me which is which.
Yeah, it does, and I probably need to redo that.
That's okay.
The shape of the pod, yeah, because I did that last minute, and I wanted to just cover it, and I think I need to just undo that. So.
No, I'm just thinking you could have more than one idea and test them out and explore them. I just want to understand so have you decided which one you prefer, or?
Yeah, I think I prefer just the straight rectangular shape.
And then you have a bright color applied to the one that's more organic and looks more like a flower or something, which is interesting in one way.
Yeah.
But, trying to understand, well, if that was the case, thinking about how that stands out, I'm just trying to understand how you thought of how that number 4 nests into the rest of the structure, or does it?
Yeah, I think I have to think about that, because originally I had it as a rectangle, just as a plain rectangular shape, and then as I was building the model and cladding it, and that flower shape formed. I left it, but I think I would have to think that through as to, how it would work, how it would nest inside. If it's possible, I guess I'd have to make it a lot smaller.
Well, sure, but do you like the idea of our idea, or do you like the one that actually that's a rectangle?
Pardon me? I didn't hear that.
I'm just curious if you, in your study, did you end up deciding which one you like better? You like the rectangle more, or if you were leaning towards the pod to try to fit that pod into the rectangle, as you were saying?
Yeah. When I first did the pod, I liked it better, and now that I'm looking at it, I'm not sure. Maybe something similar to the pod, but less pronounced. Maybe something a little more subtle.
So if you leave the drawing up that you have up there now, I see that you have, I don't know, can I point with this? No, I can't. Number 1 is the beginning of the escalator, right? And then you have the escalator going through number 2 and number 3, which is so it goes through these 2 preparation rooms. Do you get off the escalator, or you just go right through in the escalator all the way up through? I mean, what are the 2 rooms? Did you get
the
off?
Escalator starts
later again?
underneath. It starts underneath on the ground and comes up across. And then you come out here and enter the room.
So the number 2, 3, and 4 are on the same level.
Yes.
Same. Okay. And to get, it would be interesting through the long way. I guess you call that not all. The section when you
you're breaking a little.
Bob, could you repeat that because you're breaking up a little bit?
Okay. It would be interesting to see a section through the long direction going through 4, 3, 2, and 1, because so that you could think about how the angle of the escalator and how it fits into, it looks very tight in number 1. I mean, or the escalator is it's an amazing mechanical device that is going to help lift you vertically more than horizontally. And an escalator kind of brings you on a more or less 45-degree angle, where it's kind of half vertical, half horizontal, which is so that you don't fall off, for instance, right?
Yeah.
So I think your idea is really beautiful and really interesting. I'm asking these questions so I could better understand it, and also so that maybe you could help about representing it so that it actually would, I mean, because it's really interesting and beautiful how you developed it. But maybe Professor Goldstein wants to say something initially, and I could.
Okay. While you think, yeah, I'm more. I have the advantage of being more familiar with the project. So, Peter, do you have an image where all the drawings are on one, that we can see all the drawings at once?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right. So, I guess, so is this the drawing that we're seeing is the first drawing, is that right? Or is there a drawing before this? I'm forgetting.
This is the second one. Sorry, yeah, this is the first.
Okay. All right. So let's just go in order then. So to me, I think the ravine, in the way that you've drawn the ravine, is really convincing. Like because other students may not be aware, but in representing landscape and hills, one by convention in drafting, one uses these kind of lines that are the ravine lines. And so they indicate height levels. And so when you see a lot of these lines close together, it means something's very steep. So it's very convincing, all these lines. And, you know, I can imagine this sort of like narrow, deep ravine that comes from it. So I think you've represented that in a very interesting way, because it definitely feels like it drops and there's some deep in. But also, because your project is about masculine and feminine, the ravine is I think the most feminine part of the project. And so it starts to raise questions for me. So looking at the next drawing, and we'll come back to the plan, but could you go to the next drawing? This is why PowerPoint is a little bit not the best tool to present in, because one wishes to see all the drawings at once. But nevertheless, okay, so this elevator is, in this section, reads like a tower. So even though it's in plan, one begins to see that it's actually more or less a rectangular block. But in the section, it reads like a tower, which I might associate with being a masculine shape. And so, and also the way that you've drawn the ravine in the section is different than you've drawn it in the plan. In the plan, you have those series of lines which would suggest that the ravine walls are not coming straight down, but they're angling inward to a center.
Right, okay.
And it would be interesting to see, actually, the bottom of the ravine in this section drawing, because your drawings are, on one hand, they're a way to record an idea, but on the other hand, there are images that are powerful, and to sort of see the craggy walls of the ravine and all that might be interesting. So, but I think all these questions.
I wasn't entirely sure in the section drawing how much land is a part of it, or if it's just the buildings.
Yeah, no. You know, you've designed this ravine, so it's great to show it. But okay, so let me back up a little bit. So the idea of the program for these new pagans is amazing. I mean, it's an incredible thing. This, like, because it's so there's a poetry to it that comes from the Duchamp large glass, and to sort of explore it as an interior design program, I think is an amazing question. It's a really interesting, wonderful question, and where you'll get with it is you know, we can talk about, but the fact that as an interior designer you've given yourself a rich starting point for an exploration of interior design is, I think, the major point to be aware of. But so let's imagine that this was a real project, so that we don't get, you know, so it doesn't get into a discussion, well, this is school, and so we do these things in school. But, you know, what if you were given this project, like, imagine Marcel Duchamp lived in New York for many years of his life. He lived on, I believe, 11th Street or 12th Street. And so what if the house or the townhouse that Marcel Duchamp lived in was turned into a restaurant, or what if it was part of a hotel on that street? And so would it ever make sense to design a hotel lobby, or would it ever make sense to design a restaurant that was inspired by Duchamp's large glass, for instance, on the site where he lived in New York? So, you know, one can imagine that the subject matter here, which, you know, we have as some academic exercise, new pagans, whatever, but that it could actually apply to a real project. I don't think that would be too far-fetched at all, to imagine a restaurant on the site of where Marcel Duchamp lived for 30 years, and to take that as the restaurant's theme or the name, or, you know, and incorporate it. The restaurant owner would, you know, use that, what food they would serve, etc. This could be the subject matter for, or the inspiration for an actual project. So I think that's important to sort of take this out of the realm of pure academia. And then at the same time, so next point being, as an interior designer, if you give yourself a rich question to start with, then the resulting project that you do is more likely to have richness in itself. Whereas if you give yourself, and you have to give it to yourself, because the owner, the client doesn't give you, the client says hotel, the client says restaurant, but the client doesn't always give you, or rarely would give you, the design question that you're exploring. So you give that to yourself. And so if you give yourself a question that's predictable, design an Art Deco interior, we all know where that's going to go. So to what degree is that interesting? I don't know. Whereas if you give yourself a rich question, could you design a restaurant inspired by Duchamp's large glass? Wow, I don't know where that's going to go. That could really be something curious and interesting. So to a large degree, the initial question that you give yourself as an interior designer is the key starting point of any project, I would argue. And so in what sense are you giving yourself an interesting question? So this one, I think, is a fascinating question. And so now, next steps. So could you go back to the plan? Okay, so, to what degree, because it would seem that your brides are a bit masculine in their shapes. And so to what degree is that intentional or not, I don't know. Whereas the review is quite feminine. And if you were interested in, taking it in the direction of masculine, feminine a little bit more, you might think of the ravine on the bride side as continuing up to make a hill or a mountain. And so that the ravine language, which really now reads as quite feminine, could be, in fact, maybe the brides are preparing rooms are inside this landscape. And so I think that's a question in terms of masculine, feminine. The escalator, I think, is not quite convincing in the way you've drawn it, because one doesn't know sort of the starting point and the end point, and it's a little bit hard to picture. But I think the feminine question, and then related to the mechanism of this retractable bridge, I wonder. Well, I guess on one hand, I wonder whether the shape of a tower is more interesting than the shape of a rectangular slab in terms of speaking of masculinity. That's the intention. And to what degree you need 4 elevators versus 1. And if you do have 4 elevators, to what degree does the whole platform need to be a retractable platform versus a bridge? And could there be would a bridge, a narrow bridge, be more dramatic over this ravine and perhaps even more masculine compared to the whole width of this whole floor thing, folding and the mechanism? And so I would wonder that. In which case, I wonder if the bride, the main room for the bride ends up being, or maybe it ends up being a bridge in the middle in some way rather than at the end. So those are some questions generated by the floor plan. Could you go to the next section, drawing? Okay, so I guess it's nice to start to see this sort of mechanism a little bit, these diagonal lines for the retractable bridge, if you will. But I think at the end of the day, maybe it's not convincing. It doesn't seem like it would really work. Maybe, I don't know, it seems like a very big hinge and not quite sure. And so part of the interest is in this mechanism, which the way you drew it for your Maison de Verre retractable stair is an amazing drawing. It's very poetic, this sort of the dashed red lines that show what position it's in when it's in one open or shut or closed, and then the other lines that show when it's open. And so looking at your own drawing, perhaps you could be explaining the sort of hinged mechanism in the middle with red lines that show what happens when it's not extended. And the sort of the extension number 1 Oh, I see. Yeah, the number one, which is called escalator, looks like the escalator is actually inside it, the bride one. But the post that's holding this up, it's not so convincing as a mechanism. And so, and of course, it's great interest. And so those are, and a little bit unfair because these are quite complex things to draw. Same thing with the elevator is actually a mechanism as well. So the sort of pulleys and weights and all that could be, more interesting stuff, given that there's a big topic here of mechanism. So, okay, could you go to the next one?
Okay.
So, yeah, the rooms maybe not coming across, or I guess the rooms are behind this kind of brown material. To what degree the rooms are individual, the pods, I'm not sure. I think in a certain way, and the tinfoil, I'm not sure it's reading so well. I think in many ways the drawings, especially the plan drawing, is perhaps stronger. But I think it's necessary and it's helpful, and of course it would be great to see the ravine. So there are many questions, I think, raised by the model. And next. Yeah, so the sort of mechanism, and I think the strongest part is actually these kind of wires gone crazy on the ends that like, oh wow, how do those work? It starts to feel like something is being worked, that it could actually work, and I guess it hinges, but yeah, the model, I think your material, the clay, is a good choice, but the foam core flipping up at the ends maybe is not working as well. But okay, so similar questions to the next one. Yeah, so again, the sort of mechanism of these wheels and pulleys and wires, I think, are probably the strongest part of this. And you can see the hinging now. But yeah, the shape of the bride's not quite sure. Okay, and yeah, and I think representing the ravine as a gap is stronger than as a black. Is that black or is it an actual gap?
It's black. It's black, yeah.
While you have that up, could I ask a question? Why you have one continuous bridge rather than 4 separate bridges for the 4 separate brides? I'm sorry, 4 separate bachelors. And their associated 4 separate elevators?
Well, why there's 4 separate instead of 1? Well, I guess I could have definitely rethink that.
Bridge, so that all the 4 bachelors share that bridge. But isn't only one bachelor going to be chosen?
Right, but it's because you don't know which one, so I initially made it wide enough to be able to receive any of the elevators. As I was building out the model, I did actually think about, a one-lane bridge across, but I kept it wide. And part of the reason why there's 4 separate ones is to relate to large glass, because there are these kind of like 4 separate objects, and I was trying to relate to that. But it doesn't have to be so literal, I guess. So.
Right.
No, it don't have to be so literal, but at the same time, I guess I'm just wondering if each bachelor had his own bridge, would that be more appropriate to the story you're telling? Or is it better to have it shared? And why would it be shared as one big giant bridge? These are the kind of questions that as you develop the design, you would challenge to develop it in that way.
Yeah, I think there's been a great learning here in the sense of in getting at something so rich, this whole story of something so rich, the idea that to pare it down in terms of the essential storytelling components, it's because to recognize that there's a power in the simplicity of pared down storytelling at its essential components, so that nothing is extraneous and nothing is not, anything that's not super essential to the whole story is gone. And so I think there's a great learning, because I happen to have been able to witness it from the earlier part, and I know it's a lot pared down from what it was to begin with. And so I think that's probably something to take with you here as part of this experience, is the idea of having each element be super essential, nothing that's not completely essential, so that you begin to have the story be more in your control with fewer components, I think, and fewer elements. That might be sort of a big picture suggestion.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that along those lines, that it's really each of the things goes. The house that Pierre Chareau designed is a very intimate one. It's also really mostly an interior. So, and then you have, in all of their provocative and interesting subject matter, and the Duchamp, able to pick that Duchamp is incredible abstract shapes, distinct ones, but and these ideas are coming together, but at the same time, as the designer, you have the opportunity to select and orchestrate which ones are going to represent what part of the story. I think that's a lot. I'm trying to kind of, Professor Goldstein is saying, so that you can understand that you have the power to orchestrate and tell your own story, and in the same way that you found these different subject matters. I think it's pretty complex story you have, and it's so the subject matter you have are very potent ones, and rich as Professor Goldstein explained. I think that it's interesting that you something the mechanics in innovation mentioned be drawn more scientifically, maybe the same way that I mean, you might have been inspired by, in some ways, these very discrete ways in which the objects that are placed in the Duchamp artwork, those are very specific objects but they're very, very clear. They're not ambiguous at all. I don't ambiguous in terms of shape, and both they're really keen, working, which is also kind of in a strange way like happening with your model. So I don't know. I find the very curious and interesting, and that this mixture is very fascinating. But again, as the orchestrator, you decide exactly what story you're telling with the parts. So you have to define each part and each element, and that, like, you're not sure. And I think that's part of the design process, is to discover, well, oh, I have a flower shape and I have a kind of box shape, but they both nest. The idea was that they both nest into each other or into another. And so, how do you define that? How do you define that? How do you envision whether the flower shape or the box shape is going to work for your story or for for your program? I was asking you these questions because I wanted to know, thought about it yet, or maybe you need, it might be something to think about, and how would you go about thinking about it so that you could go through that design process and come up with a solution that is more along the lines of, for instance, what Joe was saying, that somehow there is clear story, a clear story when we mean that it's each part is clear and it has a more specific role in the program that.
Is there another slide after this, or this is the last one?
There's a few more.
Okay.
But,
so it's nice to see the mechanism. Again, yeah, the mechanism being one of the most interesting parts.
Yeah,
so,
I don't know, the wire got a little unruly. I had a hard time wrapping it, but.
Right. No, but, and so, yes, the ravine would give it a certain power, the bridges, but I think those are points said. This is the last one?
And I think this is a couple more.
Oh, above. Oh, okay.
So is your idea for this pod that the pod comes out with the bride, or the pod is the bride?
Well, the pod has the bride.
Right. So then
yeah.
there is an issue. I think one issue that I see in your work that as a designer that building for a person, right? The human scale that has to be adjusted in some way, perhaps. So that, I mean, that I think that you've captured concepts really clearly, and that's really wonderful to be able to pick a form and say that form is going to function to carry the bride. It's another step to say that form is going to be of a certain scale to hold the bride. Is it bride sitting, standing, lying down? Is this like a chair? Is this like a room that you stand straight up in? These are about position, scale, and relationship to the user, right? And
yeah.
that is certainly a wonderful thing as the designer. Especially as an interior designer, you should think about this in terms of how that person would be inside the pod, but also you have other individual spaces that you've created. Each have the opportunity to draw or, I mean, maybe not in the model. The model is a quick, study, but you have the drawing to be able to try to define, well, is the ceiling, is there a high ceiling, a low ceiling? Is there a certain dimension that actually allows the person to have a certain experience in that space? The spaces that you numbered, I don't see a person in. That might be the next step for to go further, to actually make more so that an actual person can use it. So, and therefore be part of the story.
I thought through some of that in the program, but I didn't draw it out, but definitely it's a good thing to do.
Okay. Is this the last image?
That's it.
Okay. So I think to sum up, I think, it's a complex thing that you undertook. And so it's not, it's not immediately it's not immediately predictable, or it's not, which is the strength of it. It's not, it takes some thinking to figure out how to boil it down to its essential components in order to then tell the story, apart from, model making and drawing and all these other issues. But I think the strength of the project is in the amazing starting point and complexity of the issues that you're taking on in interior design, which I think is a model for others to, be aware of, that interior design can, have content and can be every bit as content-filled as the greatest literature, greatest paintings. And so the idea of using a source from other disciplines, other art, other artistic endeavors as an inspiration for interior design, I think is a great, model and a great tool, a great technique. And I don't think it's so easy, but I think that there's great value in tackling something complex because, and you have a sort of round 2 up ahead. The projects in this class are very short. They're 4-week projects, 5-week projects, really short. And so it's in a way, it's really not enough time to develop these projects. And so yet the nature of the class is that it focuses on the initial stages of design process. So in some ways, the intent by giving 3 projects in the semester instead of 2 is that there's a great emphasis placed on this, how to start an interior design project. And so the idea of inventing your own program, proposing your own program, and giving yourself a rich starting point as a question, and how to work with a partee. These are all the things that are being emphasized in this class. So, in terms of what's being emphasized and how you framed the question, I think there's been a great achievement here. So let's. Sorry, Bob, could you speak more directly into a microphone? You're breaking up constantly. Or modulate your voice so that it's more even.
Can you hear me now?
Much better.
Yep.
Okay. I might have not been speaking towards the microphone.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay, did you want to say one more thing before we move on?
I don't know if I should, because I don't know how much time we have for each student.
Yeah, we do need to move on, but go ahead quickly.
I was just going to say that as you all of these I mean that this is a interesting. I mean it's supposed to be a marriage, and then so then there's a certain type of. You have to decide what you're celebrating, I think. I mean, this is a kind of occasion. This is a program that you've created. And I think that this is a very interesting study that you've taken. I guess the question is what would you do how would you look at these images, or I mean, wherever you've gotten all the different the model, the drawings, if you look at it, and you'd have to get to another step to finalize it into some type of design that's going to celebrate a specific thing. And that I think that in some ways a wonderful study to be able to play with these very rich ideas, and that I think you're starting to do some really fascinating things. But in order to gain a command of the design, just as Professor Goldstein said, it is about how to articulate these things, and in order to learn how you have to make decisions how you're going to articulate them. And if you're going to articulate them in one way or another, has to do with what is going to be your emphasis, what are you going to celebrate, or what's your focus? And that I think is I'm more or less saying the same that Professor Goldstein said, but in a different way.
Okay, so
that's all helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for volunteering to go first and sort of for the whole discussion. Very brave. So, Janisha or Elizabeth?
I can go next. This is Elizabeth.
Great, fantastic. Whoa, do we need to change the user? Oh, God.
How does this work? It'll just show what's on my computer, basically.
Oh gosh, Andy's not here. Hold on one second.
Good job, Peter. That's Marie. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Even though I can't see, I was completely engaged.
The whole topic is very impressive.
Yeah, it was really good. I mean, honestly.
Thanks.
I
have to say, I do really feel like it's just a starting point, as they were saying. So, I would go back and completely redo things. So, but it's yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, really cool. I don't know how you came up with that.
And the elevator thing is like amazing, and the ravine. I mean, the elevator concept is so complex, but it's just the whole concept, it's really very advanced. Good job.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so we're at the moment without our IT support. So does anyone know how to switch, give participant, give control
here we go.
to the user?
I figured it out.
Excellent.
Okay, Elizabeth, I just made you presenter.
Presenter? Okay, so whatever I put on my screen, you guys can see? Is that how it works?
You have to go to share.
Okay.
And then under share, you have options, desktop, applications, and you choose, I did applications.
Oh, and you have to pick one of these?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, what's whiteboard? Something different. Okay.
There you go.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Great. So I thought I'd start with the original project that we worked on, which my house that I chose was Casa Luis Barragán. And in the analysis of this house, I was continuously or more and more drawn to the use of light or manipulation of light in the house. And so in our new pagans are obsessed with light. So I'm just skipping ahead to the analysis of light section. Here we go, right here. So in our analysis of this house, we looked at how the light flows in throughout the day, and then how the light is manipulated with shutters and skylights, as well as just windows, and how it creates different moods and shadows. And then here's another image of the shutters opened and closed and how it changes the diffusion of light in the room and also the mood of the room. So that's just a quick synopsis of that project. So we can move on to the Temple for the New Pagans, my faux religion. Here is, can you see everything okay here?
Fine.
Yep. Okay,
great. Okay, so this is just an image we'll get to later. So looking at the program for the New Pagans, their temple is called the Temple of Light and the Worship of Ra. The client fell in love with the house I just mentioned on a trip to Mexico, and they were scouting out all of their locations. And they really wanted to emphasize or control the light in a similar manner in their temple. And they really they appreciated Barragán's use of light, but they really wanted to make their project a little bit more symmetrical or classical in nature, because their religion harkens back to the sun god Ra, which the ancient Egypt worshipped. Their temple is located in Yuma, Arizona, where there is 4,000 hours of sunlight annually, so they can maximize their light. These congregants need areas for observing and studying the light and shadows at different times of day, and this will become more apparent as we look at the plans. When the visitors first are received, they spend a lot of their time studying the light in the interior portion of the temple, and then eventually they can work their way up to joining the existing congregants in the outside portion of the temple, which is where it's the bright light in the center of the day. So looking here at the plan, you can see here the door where you enter, and this is all an interior surround, and this is an outside courtyard. So the new congregants can walk through these different areas throughout the day to observe the different light patterns, which will become evident later when we look at the model. When they are first joining the program, they walk in different times of day. This is facing north, this way here. So the light filters all throughout the building throughout the day.
Which way?
I'm sorry, my kids are here. This is north. This is I'm sorry?
It's hard to tell. Oh, there's a sundial? Oh, I see.
Oh, here, let me zoom in. Can you see it now?
Yeah, that's better to see that part.
So this is a sundial and a fountain in the center of the courtyard. Here's north, and the other directions are evident. So the congregants gather in noon in the brilliant and direct sunlight out in their courtyard. Looking at, we're going to skip ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, did someone have a question? No, okay. Looking ahead to the section, this is facing north. So here's an elevation of the garden, looking through these light areas, which are all open little windows that let in the light here. And then they face down towards the back of the temple. Here is an exterior of the model from the outside. There aren't many openings from the exterior, similar to Barragon's work. It's kind of a protected temple, very simple in the exterior. Here's an aerial shot of the courtyard. And you can see here a little bit, get a sense of the openings and the sides of these hallways here, as well as some skylights in the back where the light is more diffused.
And does light come through those, just before you move, is light coming through the narrow openings, or where is light coming through the sides there, or only straight down?
What'd you say? I'm sorry, through the sides, yes, just through the sides.
From the courtyard.
What, I'm sorry,
yeah.
Why don't continue, you'll see other views of the model with light.
Yeah, I think it gets more clear as we look at the photos that I have here.
Good, thank you, sorry.
So it's okay. Here's an image looking, I guess, west through the courtyard, and you can kind of see how the light filters through. There's a statue here of Ra on the right-hand side, which you can see looking down the corridor with a skylight overhead that projects light on at certain points of the day. So this is a view out into the courtyard. You can see the sundial, fountain, and the garden. And then here's a picture where you can see different times of day with the light coming through one of the side corridors or hallways. And then, let me zoom in a little. Yeah. Here's some more views of just the light filtering through. This is the back of the temple here. This is the front. There's some windows in the front that also allow some light, natural light in. And then here's looking down at the feature point at the end of this hallway here. And then here is kind of a synopsis of the whole project, so you can see everything together, and that's kind of the end right there.
Can you explain, you have skylights, and that those skylights are for what purpose?
So as you can see here, there's just different ways of diffusing the light and creating different moods as you walk on the interior of the building around the courtyard. So it's just a different, the new pagans study the light and they draw the light and in different facets throughout as they walk throughout the building.
So I see two ways, that there's the repetitive, I don't know if those are columns or narrow slots, and then I see the narrow slots as kind of like windows or kind of like a cloister, you know, around a courtyard, because it's a hallway, right, that you walk all the way around.
Exactly. And then the ends are, the front and back, rear are darker with just either overhead skylights or windows from the exterior, and then on the sides, in the morning on one side, it allows the light in the afternoon on the other side, as the sun goes from one side over the building.
And then you have the walls that rise up higher than the hallway. Is there a reason for that, or how does that work?
No, you know, there isn't really a reason for that other than, I don't know, it just kind of, the design just kind of came out that way.
And is there a sequence, is there like a progression of how these pagans would actually use each of the spaces? How would they move from one space to the other?
Well, they first, when they come in the morning, they use the corridor where the light comes in from the east, and then they all meet in the brilliant direct sun at noon in the center of the courtyard. Excuse me 1 minute. And then in the afternoons, they would go to the other side of the courtyard and just draw the light as they, or shadows as they see them.
Okay. And then have a different, the skylight light part, is that used in a certain way, or?
It's just another way of diffusing the light into the building in a different fashion.
Okay. I guess I'm wondering, I think that it's really wonderful how you created the contrast between the light that's coming in on an angle and creating these striations into the hallway. As you walk through it, you would certainly be very aware of the light coming through the between these that's a kind of like columns or piers, versus and creating that contrast to by creating a solid wall and letting the light come straight down in. That's certainly creating a very a distinct difference. But I guess the reason why I was asking these questions is I want to understand, why would you create that difference? Not too different than the other project. It's about trying to articulate why you would do one thing versus another and to assign it to a certain programmatic use that helps you understand why you have it that way. Technical problem that you have, I mean, it's great and wonderful that you were able to make a model and actually take photographs with the, studying it with the light and showing it. That's in itself an achievement, to be able to actually show how the light would work through that is not so easy to capture, even in a, so that's an achievement. The question is, you're dealing with something that's fairly technical. Ideally, I guess if you had there are certainly there are programs that help you design light for interiors, and there's programs that help you design light for light coming from the sun into a space through a window. But it is a much more technical requirement that
I'm sure than for my fictional religion.
So, on one hand, what you're working with is a very challenging one, knowing that I don't think anybody, who's just starting in this kind of design process, that kind of, I think, is a bit of an obstacle in some ways, because I think that you've been successful on the one hand, but on the other hand, it seems like you needed a tool to be able to actually maybe, the model, I think, is the best tool, but maybe there's another.
Sorry.
Professor Goldstein?
Well, okay, so I think on one hand, the interest is in light, but on the other hand, I think what might, and I think there are some remarkable achievements and discoveries that have been made relative to light, especially these model shots where like the large one on the right at the top and the corridor ones they're really, so in other words, you're drawn by the light in Bargan as photographed by others. And so I think that that's, you know, an amazing thing, and so to what degree are you able to use the tools you have available, model making, photographs, et cetera, drawings, to get at some of those qualities? And so the expectation is that there are photographs or drawings or models that show some brilliant, or meaning in the sense of brilliant light, some kind of diffused light, all those sort of qualities that light can do. And your model photographs are really capturing something amazing and in terms of the pattern and repetition, which may be actually different qualities than Bargan, but nevertheless with light, and the sort of like super bright courtyard in the photograph on the upper right, you really captured something, which is quite an achievement. And so I think that, you know, it's one thing to talk about light, it's another thing to show examples of light from other places and other people's photos. It's another thing to make a model in which your subject matter is light and then capture it in a black and white photo. I think it's actually, you know, an amazing thing. And so I really think you've hit upon something with the light. But having said that, in a certain way, what's possibly more interesting to me is the idea that you've made a courtyard, and you've made this courtyard totally inward facing. And so you have very few openings on the outside, and your sort of barrier between when you're in that courtyard and the outside world is you have a hallway, you have a wall with these vertical slots, and then you have a hallway, and then you have and then you're pretty much a solid wall. So you're really protected from the outside world, and you've framed this bit of landscape through this thickened frame, if you will. Your structure is really a frame, and it's a thick frame that separates this inner world from the outside world, whatever the outside world might be. And so if you were to say, to me, it starts to speak about creating ideal worlds. Because it's like, okay, let's take the chaos and whatever's going on outside in the world, and let's create another world inside this barrier, this strong separation from our world that we're going to make, this new religion, and we're going to make this new world, and we're going to put the outside world really outside. We're going to have a really thick, heavy, large separation. And so apart from any questions of light, the fact that you made this court with all the walls being solid for the most part around the outside, I think speaks to creating, and you see these kind of courts in cloisters and in schools, frankly. And so those are kind of examples of where the intention is to create a new world in an idealized sense. And so your courtyard starts to speak of being I think of being an ideal world, and it's an opportunity to design a world that's better than the world outside these walls. That it's almost a chance to remake a universe or remake a society or remake a world in this courtyard. And so on one hand, the question, and so could light be the basis of making this world? Well, maybe. But I think that the next set of questions that come out of this, having done this amazing study of certain qualities of light, largely repetition and sort of shadow, dark shadow and bright light, and then on the other hand, this sort of setting up of this major, and I'm looking mostly at the models here, sort of setting up of this major idea of framing an idealized world. Those are sort of the next level questions become, well, what is this ideal world about? And to what degree, if it's about light, well, how can light really make this landscape? Like, would there be certain plants that do well in the shadow, and those are closer to the solid walls at the top and the bottom, and are the, north, like how would things actually grow? To define your intention for the idealized world would be a necessary next step, I think, because otherwise it's sort of anything could happen in this ideal world. And what is it? Is it framing just a purely natural landscape that was there? And is the landscape that you show outside the walls, is it like wild and not like two trees symmetrical around the entrance, and it's like nature is like crazed to get in, and it's all unruly, and it's trying to take over the walls with ivy and whatever. It's like, it's a force that's trying to, get in, versus the nature that's inside, which is calm and tranquil and contained. And so I think the next level questions have to do with, what is this garden, or this ideal garden that's sort of like an ideal world that you've made? And perhaps it could be light generated. But I think these are rich questions. I think you've kind of, in your study of light, you've sort of hit upon this idea that it's really a powerful space that you made.
I think that another place you could have drawn from is Barragan's work, in that it seems like you've chosen mostly one part of his work that inspired you the most, the way in which he has these shutters. You did show an analysis, but I think that certain art itself, if you look at his analyze on the roof, there is a courtyard itself, and it basically is a play of volumetric forms and colors, and that create shadow, and that are certainly lit by the sun, the same way that the courtyard is lit by the sun. Choosing a courtyard is very appropriate because it certainly reflects the way in which Barragan worked and did work with courtyards. I think in the courtyard, it was nature that actually capturing the shadows again. If you look at some of, I don't know if it's specific house, but I understand that shadows were captured on, or they fell on the textured surfaces of the plain and simple wall. So, for instance, you have a plain and simple wall on the north and south side. So how would you think about how to position the landscape elements that you have there, so that they could also help show other characteristics that pagans would actually celebrate in terms of light characteristics that are happening in the courtyard? Because I think you mostly focused on how the light works for the hallway area around the courtyard, but how the light actually works inside the courtyard when you're standing there is, I guess, one part that could have been developed more. But you certainly had have a lot of other examples that Barragan, yes, was studying all these. And then I just was wondering if the gather in the center, how many pagans would center, and where would they stand? Do you think about that, or?
Well, right now there's only 5, I think.
5? Did you actually?
In our program, it says there's only 5 pagans, I think, but it's going to grow, okay. And they just circle. Right now, they just gather around the sundial.
Because I think it's a matter of understanding how you design the courtyard, sort of the way you would design a living room, for instance, or a large space, or a space that would be part of a kind of like a lobby space of a hotel. Where would they gather? Where would they sit? Is there a place for them to sit? Are they going to stand together? Are they going to be separated by, there's many ways in which you can develop it. I mean, putting the sundial there certainly helps you make a statement about celebrating the sun, which is wonderful. I'm just bringing up other ways to think about how you would define and articulate what happens in the courtyard.
I think these are all good questions. So let's look at the drawings more closely. I think that the idea, if you want to enter the space, and so you put a sort of solid wall after you enter it, I think that, makes sense. And yet, and so it's the same, and then you maybe want to mirror, and so instead of doing a three-sided courtyard, you do two sides, and okay, so that's maybe why the skylights are on the back side, because that's fairly dark back there. But I guess the questions might be, why the path? Should the sundial be located in the direct center? Maybe, but should the paths? It depends what vision of the universe, or vision of an ideal city, or vision of an ideal society is at play here, because I think you've set up the discussion to be one, which isn't an easy thing to do. You've set up the discussion to be one in which one is ready to experience an ideal society. And so in many religions are kind of based on this. And so the idea of what now are the components, it's like, well, what you sort of want to define for yourself the content. But the questions that come out of that would be, do you need the paths along the slotted wall on the courtyard side? Do you need the paths? Like, why the center, the paths that you enter, that you go to be near the sundial, one, you have to first walk parallel to the slots, and then you take a right or a left to the sundial. And so why is that? What's that about? Should it be a diagonal? Should it be a curving path? Should the landscape that's inside be hilly or various levels? Should there be places to sit? How does it react to north, south, east, west? All those and so to use the drawings to draw in the light and shadow would seem to be one first step that you're using the model a lot and you're using it to great effect. I wonder to what degree you can imagine that you didn't have the model and you only could use the drawings. How could you use your drawings to be more investigatory, that's a word, compared to documenting a done deal that you've designed in the model? How can you use it to sort of be more speculative about trying to understand a condition? Because I think in the model, you might have experimented with things, and then you tried the light, and then you photographed it, and oh, wow, look what happened. And so there's a spirit that comes across in the model that's really powerful. And really and especially even the ones that you've made small with these repetitive slices of light along, those would be really powerful as large images. And so I think, I think you're really onto something. And so using every tool at your disposal, especially the drawings more so, would be maybe something to take for the next project.
And to illustrate that, I think, for example, in the drawing, you could show certainly the shadows of whatever would be happening in the courtyard, or where the light is, or maybe it would be a reverse image, like the walls would not be pochette black, they would be white. So then you would be able to help show where the light is. If the light is coming in, it would be a bright light, and then the background black. How you think about how you're going to portray what characteristics are the strengths of your project, and so I think that's what Joe was speaking to. I actually found it interesting that effort to put in a scale model of a person that's raw, is that right? Which was very kind of entertaining and a little...
He's kind of creepy. He's like going like this.
But that is is that like a scale of a person, or is that bigger than a?
I think he's 6 feet tall. I think he's like 6 feet tall.
Okay. Well, it's nice to see some scale figure, even if he was a monster, 25 feet tall. You know, that's a scale in that space.
I guess maybe to summarize, or to just end with this comment, the idea that when you do your projects in the future, that you're using the drawings and models and computer tools and whatever tools to sort of speculate as opposed to demonstrate, that might be a spirit in which to take from this. And the idea that, what if I tried this and what would it look like, and those kind of questions about, you know, starting with a question and sort of seeing where it goes, I think that's a certain spirit. But also that if your intention is to speak to a certain topic, that your drawings and your model shots, your model photographs are really communicating the mystery of the topic or whatever feeling. So the idea that you're using these model photographs and you're making them black and white to emphasize the light, and you chose that light source. It wasn't like a casual photograph. You really, you know, positioned the light in order to take these pictures. That you're really trying to communicate in a sort of in a way that makes the viewer feel the power and the magic quality of the light. And so you've really done it. It's very convincing. And so the idea that you know, as a client, I would say, oh wow, I want to let's build that. That would be an amazing thing. But as a student, that you're not saying, well, the quality of the light would be this, this, and that. And in some kind of verbal discussion, you're making us feel it by drawing it and by making it and photographing it. And I think that's really a great thing to take with you into your future classes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so Janisha, are you with us?
Sorry. Yes, I am. Sorry, okay, I had to disconnect for a moment.
I got your email and I saw that you thought you had to leave, but now you're back, and so you've been back. So I'm very glad. And so, are you ready to present your project?
Yes. So I didn't do a PowerPoint. So I'm going to turn my computer facing my model.
Great.
Okay. Let me know if you guys can see it. Okay. Can you see it?
I think the bottom is cut off a little bit.
Let me see.
Hold on, let me change my screen. Yeah, I think the bottom is cut off a little bit.
Can you see it okay?
Better, but maybe it's still a little bit cut off at the bottom.
Okay, I'm going to try to, I have it on a box, so I'm going to see if I lower it. Can you see it now?
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay. Okay, sorry, 1 second. Okay.
Maybe take away the boards to the.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Oops.
Is that okay?
Yeah, we lost a little bit of the gray in the foreground, but I think it's good.
Oh, okay. Let me see, maybe. Better.
Worse, actually.
Oh.
There. Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay. So I did my presentation pretty much with the inspiration behind my first project, which was the Healy guest house, and then also my trip that I recently took to Bali. So the model that you see in front of you, it's a temple based in Bali, and it's very, very close, like sitting almost in the water. That's where it's like, down here it's actually like blue, just to represent water, and then you have like the little pebble stones that's going up to the temple. So my whole concept behind the temple was to be very airy and light and open, very minimalistic. And I just wanted to capture the essence of the people of Bali and how they would go into these temples to pray, as well as the, from the Healy House, I was really fascinated by the indoor-outdoor aspects of the house. And I have an inspiration board. I'm going to just put it, maybe hopefully you guys can see it. There's just some photos of the temple in Bali and just showing like how it's like sitting on the water, and then just showing like there's pretty much no furniture in there. It's just like you go there and you sit on the floor. And then here goes the inspiration from the Healy guest house. And you can see it's like right adjacent to the water, and then there's like the grass there. And just like how you're able to go into the water very easily, or you could stay in the house, but everything is surrounded by nature. And some of the materials that I chose for my model, I kept everything white, and I painted, at the top you'll see here, it's straws, but it's supposed to represent bamboo sticks. And then the steps are in stone, the flooring is in stone, the bench that's in there is of teak wood, and the columns is of stone as well. So pretty much for this project with the indoor-outdoor feel for the Healy House, I really wanted to be about nature, surrounded by, like, obviously I don't have trees in mind, but from the Healy House, they're surrounded by nature, trees, the water, the sense of the air flowing in and out of the house, the smell of the flowers, and just like the fresh scent of it. I was really inspired by that from the Healy House, and I wanted to incorporate that into my temple here that I have. And then for my drawing, sorry, are you guys able to see my board? Sorry, I don't know.
No, we see the part that says materials at the bottom.
Okay, maybe if I put it or change my.
Further back, actually.
Can you see it now?
Is there something above the two photographs at the second? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Still, we're cutting off the top.
Let me see. Is it better now? Sorry.
I think the camera should be further back.
Okay. Sorry, it's on a desk. I don't know. Let me put it on this box again.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe you can see it better now.
Yes. Yes. Perfect.
Okay. I'm going to bring the computer up, so then you can just get a better idea of the photos that I'm referring to. Are you able to see it?
A little bit, if you can go. Yeah. Okay, can you move it to the top, the bottom of the board?
Is that better? Sorry. Maybe it would have been better to do PowerPoint. Yeah. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
The camera. That's good. If you bring it closer. That's good. Okay. You're losing the picture.
Okay, I think we've in various ways we've seen each one. Maybe we're not seeing the whole thing at once, but I think we've seen each one.
Okay, sorry about that. So those are my inspiration, and then just for my sketches of the house, I just have a plan and then a frontal view of it, just a rough sketch of the drawing. Can you see it? I don't know.
hard to see.
Would it be better if I just sent a PowerPoint?
No. That's fine.
If you could bring it closer to the camera, maybe. Just bring it closer to the camera. Yeah, that's better. You could bring it a little closer. Just show half the board at a time. You're doing, and
Sorry. Is that better? Sorry, I don't know if you guys are able to get a good representation of the project, but yeah, so I'll just kind of just keep talking about it. So it's pretty much the model is based in Bali, as I mentioned before, and I just wanted to capture the essence of the indoor-outdoor space, just following what Paul Rupp did in the Healy Guest House, and as far as my trip as well from Bali. So just going back to the model, as you can see, it's 2 columns on, well, 1 column on each side, just holding the side of it, and then there is the flat wall in the back. As I mentioned before, it's very open, so you can just go up the steps, and either it's up to your choice if you would like to sit on the floor or go to the bench. The bench can also be utilized as a table, but pretty much when the people in Bali, they go to the temple, they're bringing flowers or holy water to pray. So it's just so you can rest it on there. And as far as like, there's no railing or anything. It's not too far. It's below 18 inches above the water. So you're able to just hang off, and you can put your feet in the water if you like, or you can, like I said, go and sit on the bench. And then just so you can see, like, there's also a little opening in the back here just to bring in some more light and airiness to the model.
What is 18 inches high?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
What is 18 inches high, the bench, or what?
Oh, no, I was saying it's not more than 18 inches high from the water. So, like, if someone's sitting on the floor, it's not like they're going to fall off into the deep end.
The steps are not, or you mean that the steps are not 18 inches high?
Oh, like the temple itself, like the floor, from where you could see, like, the rocks, it's not that far off from the water.
Point on your model.
Oh,
the
like
floor.
right here?
Yeah.
To where the rocks are.
Oh, I see. I got it. Okay. So in other words, there you have kind of a shelf or an area that's higher up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then those would be the steps in the front.
Okay. And then where do the people come from? Do they come from water? How do they enter?
So it's also based off of this one temple that I visited there. So it's pretty much you like walk through the water and then you climb the temple. Like you climb the stairs to go into the temple.
Uh-huh.
So the water it's not very deep at all. It's like in the beginning part of the ocean.
Uh-huh. Very beautiful part. But could you just keep the model pictures up there? Yeah.
Sure.
It's a little hard moving about.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me see if I can. Is this better?
Yeah, better. And then there's a slot on either. You have what you call a column, which looks more like a wall to me. On the sides, you have a column, or is that a wall?
Well, it's not. I'm referencing it as a column, but it's a short wall, a very short wall.
Oh. And then so that there's a space between the wall and the back wall. Is that right?
Yes.
On both sides.
Yes.
Why do you have that instead of keeping it like a niche?
Well, just because I wanted it to be able, you could access it from that way. So if you went further into the water, you can climb there or sit from there with your feet like dangling into the water. So I was just trying to keep it.
You have to step up 18 inches to get, or is there
Well,
more?
The stairs are right there, but like if you wanted to sit off on the ledge, you're able to sit in that area, or you can sit here.
Oh, I see. So you could sit off the ledge where the hole in the wall is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
On the floor.
Yeah, it's a floor.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know. Did you say something? I couldn't hear you.
No, I'm thinking. I missed a little part. I had to rush out for a little mini emergency. But in any event, I think that you certainly have captured something that is celebrating the spirit of what a temple is. I'm not sure if, how this relates to your own ideas, because it sounds like something that you've experienced before, that you're rebuilding.
Not so much experience fully, because I haven't experienced anything exactly like this, but just a reference to it. My take on it. I'm just trying to combine the Healy House with the temples that I saw in Bali.
And then it's very interesting that you have these steps that are very gradually long steps. That's very beautiful, you know, instead of just short little ones. And is that aspect of something that you've interpreted, or is that something?
Yeah, that was just my take on it. Like when I went to Bali, the steps were much shorter, but I just always wonder while I was looking at it, like how would it look if you had like longer stairs, and maybe even since it's so custom for them to sit on the floor, that they could also sit on these stairs as well.
I think that now I start to see a theme that you've said that maybe you could have helped to explain in your presentation, but also maybe help develop further in your design, which is this idea of different places for people to sit on a stair-like place, or because the places that you've described, both the stairs, and if you're sitting on the stairs, I guess the question is if you're sitting so that your legs are passing across other stairs, or is it just for one step at a time? In this case, it looks like going to sit, you would kind of be forced to kind of out over the whole stair length. Is that right?
Yes.
Because they're very gradual stairs.
Yes.
Very long steps.
Yes, that's correct.
And that's certainly a very big contrast to that little spot where you would sit and dangle your feet off the edge, which seems like an interesting idea too. I mean, you'd be facing a different direction and you have a slot, but again, I would not have known that if I didn't ask you those questions. So it would have been helpful to know how you might use this space by showing a person perhaps sitting in those two positions. Might have helped me know that in a second.
Okay.
Or maybe it was about show a certain sequence of a linear progression of where somebody they were going to come to this temple, what would be the formal way in which they would walk to the temple or up to the temple, and then where would they, what would they do? They would offering on the bench.
Yeah,
down,
like they.
Or contemplate on the stair or over in that slot, dangling their feet. You could have shown that in a drawing, or somehow thought about how you could have told some type of progression of how you would use this. And I'm only saying this because, for instance, the first project helped think very specifically about step 1, step 2, step 3. This happens first, this happens second. It's part of the program use of the space, or that Peter was saying, helped to break up into separate events along the way. Okay. And so I'm saying that I'm just trying to help think about other ways, both help to design your project, but also document it.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess I think it's instructive to recognize that, I mean, you definitely, through a relatively, I don't know if simple is the right word, but relatively few gestures, relatively few moves, if you will, you've created, you know, a very sort of recognizable space that you know, one can easily imagine that this is used for some kind of ceremony. And so, and yet it's relatively humble and it's relatively simple. And so you've gotten to a place where you kind of have essentially pared it down to a number of very economical gestures, which I think is a good thing to recognize, because it's not so easy sometimes to do that. And so the idea that you have these kind of, okay, here's the table, here's the roof, here's the lifted plinth or platform, and here's the steps onto it, and, you know, we can talk about these side and short walls. And then it's on the landscape, and that's it. And so, you know, by doing a relatively few number of things, yet each one has a certain power, especially the idea of lifting it off the ground. So the idea that you're going to you're leaving the earth, if you will, and you're walking up these 3 steps onto this platform is very meaningful. And so to understand that you've created this religious space, or this new pagan religious space, simply really by going up 3 steps onto a platform above the water, above the rocks, above the ground, has a lot of power. And so to recognize that even the simplest moves can sometimes be enough, and that they have.
You know,
Go ahead, Bob. No, go ahead.
No, I'm just, that it's interesting that, first of all, she's coming out, I mean, the person would come out of the water, right? Not out of the earth. I mean, it's interesting that just before, it sounds like there is a sequence of events that happen. There is a path that the person takes, and I think they start before they're in the water. I mean, their model starts at the water, but really, I think you have to come up with another level that allows you to enter into the water, right? There is a place that person would start, and then they would experience the water in front of them, and then maybe the reflection of this place you've created, they would be able to see that reflection if they're standing further back in front of the water, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, when you were in Bali, did you see reflections in the water of things like?
Sorry, I didn't catch the end. My computer actually froze. I didn't catch the end of what you just said.
Did you see reflections in the water in Bali of how a temple or a Buddha, for instance, might have been reflected in the water?
I didn't notice that while I was there, but I'm not to say that obviously didn't happen, but I didn't notice it.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that in your model, it's hard. I mean, it seems like the area around your temple might have been, if you thought of it a little bit larger in terms of a little bit more space all the way around it, you might have thought about how you experience the water plus the stairs plus the backstop basically of this altar, a kind of altar, right, that you've created together. But you couldn't do it unless you have that other part, the outer part. And it's interesting that these the roof overhang is very, very thick. Is that something that you also experienced, or is it something that you were creating?
No, it's something I created on my own. They normally use like the roof hatch, but I did see like there was some, when you go inside, there's like bamboo sticks in the inside of the roof, so I wanted to put on an aspect and put it on the outside.
It certainly has a very, I don't know, it's very different than every other aspect of the temple. But I don't know if it's a roof. I don't know if it's just an overhang. I don't know what it's doing. And then the way you define the landscape is very loose. It's very suggestive. It could be more specific. Piling up rocks against not rocks, but gravel, I guess, against the model is very effective. But in that it helps know that I guess the land gradually goes. But I don't know if you had as much conviction about sculpting that land as you could have done. You could have decided exactly where it began and started. How would you tailor the shape of those pebbles so that you understand where they start and stop? It looks like you kind of, I don't know, you had it just whatever amount you had and you kind of put it up against their.
No, I had more. I just kept it where the water was in the front of it, near like near the stairs, and then the pebbles were surrounding it.
The pebbles were surrounding it? Oh,
well, I'm saying like, yeah, like if you see it, like there's some pebbles there, so this is the reference, like, oh, it's gonna you're gonna see it more and more, like slowly progressing into like a higher amount. But the water was really in the front of it where you can't really see the rock. So that's kind of like my idea behind it.
So it's interesting that is a very interesting concept. It's hard to, it's very subtle, and maybe because you wanted to, so you're saying you wanted to experience the collection of the pebbles behind these stairs, and that they're kind of collect more and more. They're more dense.
Yeah. Because I just wanted it to be like when you when you're walking towards. So let's say that this is the water is right here. Before that, there's like little sand, which I don't have a reference of the sand, but there would be sand here. So you're walking into the temple, and then all you see really is water, and then you see these stairs. And then you gradually notice as you're walking up, oh, there's like pebbles on the side, and it's getting larger in quantity.
See, I think that's a very clear idea. It's hard to see in the model, I guess. I mean, the pebbles are there, but the sand part is hard to understand. And then and then it's hard to understand is the water then cut out of the sand? Is that a separate kind of like a separate pool of water? How is there walls holding that water up?
No, it's just like I don't know how to explain it. While I was there, it's pretty much just the ocean, and it's like a beach. It's like there's the sand there, you're standing on the sand, and then you just go into the water, into temples. So you have to like gradually like move yourself through the water to get to the temples. I was trying to locate sand. I didn't have sand to like actually show it as a reference.
Right. So I think what's deceptive or maybe confusing to me is that the water is represented with a rectangle. So that you chose a rectangle when maybe it sounds like what you intended was some type of natural pool of water that was that is in a low area of the beach-like area that you walk start from. Is that right?
Yes. Mhm.
Because to me, it's like that's part of the temple design, because you have a rectangle. I can't point, but there is a rectangle, you know, that you've chosen to. So it starts to look like that's intentionally part of the temple, but it isn't. I mean, it is as part of the experience, but it's supposed to be really part of the landscape, what I think you're describing, and not specific part of the temple dimensions, geometry, all that.
Yeah, that's correct. I just wanted to show it.
Yeah, it's part of the temple experience, and it sounds like the temple has a relationship to that low body of water, that very narrow kind of pool of water that is really, that I guess would have more of an uneven edge, right? Because it would be type of water resting in sand.
Yeah, more fluid.
Unless you want it perfectly designed to be straight, and you would somehow let us know that. But I'm only bringing these things up because these are the things that designers do. They articulate form and landscape, in this case, or the temple's shape and parameters, and you have the ability to let people know more about the whole experience, so that they can appreciate the whole experience fully. Because the more you tell me, the more I'm intrigued to see that documented somehow, either in your model or in drawing.
Yeah, I think the issue is, on one hand, it's a really poetic idea that you approach this temple from the water. And so the idea that you're kind of, one, there's no staircase off to the side, or there's no other way to get to this place, frankly, except by emerging out of the water. And that's very poetic. It feels like, you know, that this is a place of great ancient myths, you know, this emerging out of the water. And that's the only way you can leave this place too. You have to, I don't know if you come by boat or you're swimming or whatever, but you can only enter and you can only leave by going in the water. And so to make us feel that poetry, which I think is very beautiful, it's hard to do in a model because the water is moving. But the water does have, it's not a hard edge, and it is a sort of an easier edge in the way that water kind of, if there's a wave and if it's not a still body of water, the qualities of the water become important. And so you're representing the water as more still water, and also, you know, to what degree does it go beyond the sides of the steps or questions. So you're asking the view, you have in mind something that's very beautiful, but you're asking the viewer to do too much work to imagine it. Whereas if you would want to make that in your model, to study it and to communicate it, that would be a better next step.
Okay.
So, but on the other hand, it's, you know, the idea that I can imagine the water like washing over the steps, and it's a very beautiful idea, I think. And so what I would say is, it would be perhaps an easier thing to draw. So you could draw the different conditions of the water coming up, and so it might be an easier thing to use drawings to communicate. The way you're doing the light at this very moment is very nice. It's different, and it justifies that slot that you've created behind the short wall, because it's like you're framing the table, and you're backlighting it, or you're side lighting it with the solid wall and the light shining in a certain way. That's very beautiful. Whereas other times, at moments in this presentation, you've had the model in a different light, and so the idea of photographing the model in the light that you want, because now all of a sudden, where you have the light off to the side and the light is side lighting that wall, and the table is in silhouette to some degree, all of a sudden has much more power. And so that's very interesting to see. So, but in doing this, you know, which has, it's very poetic and it's very simple and there are very few moves, and I think that's also its strength. And so with this simplicity, there's an obligation that every move be just so much thinking and so much thought because there are very relatively few moves. And so there's a sort of special obligation in this language. And so the idea of being able to be super complex in your thinking, yet using a very simple way to express it. So the idea of, you know, should the water extend further? Should you represent things with sand? Should you have more gaps between the tread, if you will, and the sort of shadow line of the stairs? Or should you show the water kind of emerging onto the stairs? Or should the stairs be the same length as the platform? And to what degree, what is the right table height? And if there are flowers on the table, you know, to what degree do you show them? And all these sort of things, I can imagine sitting on the steps and getting like my feet wet, and all these things you could put in drawings as well. And so could you go to your perspective drawing, the drawing that you did?
Sure.
We're going to wrap up shortly. Also, the background that you show is important. You know, it's sort of, you know, are there any other, is it all rocks or gravel on your site, or are there any plantings, or what's beyond your site in this case especially, because you're seeing this sort of framed volume against the sort of horizon line might be interesting to note.
Okay.
Yeah, so so your plan is a little bit different than your model in terms of the sides where the stairs are, and you probably should draw the thatched roof or straw roof with dashed lines to indicate that. You might want to sort of show the light, because in, again, doing very few moves, every single move becomes super critical and super important. But you really have got, in this perspective, similar to your Paul Rudolph analysis, you have this sort of vanishing point right at the center where there's sort of an absence of a person. And so it's like a sort of temple waiting to be populated. And your perspectival viewpoint that you're choosing is in the water. So your perspective drawing might be a very useful drawing to develop. I think you're working largely in the model. And so I wonder if you could imagine not having the model and you had to present the project using only, you know, the drawings. And so one, where, you know, draw the section, and two, could you have your plans and your perspective that you've chosen to do be equally as powerful as the model, which I think is a question in general for all the students to sort of recognize. But in summary, I think the power of the project is in its simplicity and in the poetry of having its relationship to a body of water, and in its very few simple moves, all of which can be very powerful. So, so thank you. So to wrap up, thank you all. I think today's been hopefully an amazing learning experience for everybody. It's certainly been of great interest for me, and I appreciate the patience with the technology. And as well, Marie, I don't know if you're still there.
I'm still here. I mean, if you want me to, I could verbally present, and then I could send a PDF, or I could post it on the school site when I get back up. If that, would that be sufficient, or what would you advise?
Well, I sort of did the timing assuming that you weren't connected, but I don't know.
No, I've been here throughout.
No, I understand that you're there, but you don't have the ability to put your work in a PowerPoint for us to see. So I don't know that a verbal presentation would be so good. Is there a way that you can put your work so that we can see it?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I'm able to get back on the internet, I can submit my PDF of my presentation, I can post it on Open Class under discussion topics so everyone can see what I'm speaking of. You know, but at least I can give the...
What I would suggest is that would be better is if you could video record yourself making the presentation so that we all could watch it with hearing you and seeing it at the same time. I think it would be really strange to hear it and then not see it, and then see it later and remember what you're saying.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's fine, sure.
Too out of sync. But what I would like to let you know is that I've recorded this so that I can, you know, hopefully the school will be able to figure out a way that you can get the video of this so that you'll be able to see other students. And then if you could record yourself doing a presentation with your project, you know, as part of it, then the other students would be able to hear you and as well see the project at the same time, and then I'll figure out how to get my comments and the guest critic, Robert Cohen's comments, to you and the class as well.
Okay, that's fine, sure, no problem.
And I think we're in, you know, we're in a world where we're doing new things, and so the technology isn't always 100%, and I think that's understandable. Okay. So, okay. So again, any questions, any thoughts? Well, I'm not at this moment, or yeah, any thoughts from students?
I guess I would just say that I found this to be extremely useful and really valuable in general, and that, you know, the online thing is great, but I think having the ability to communicate in this way has been really beneficial.
Okay, that's great to hear. I very much appreciate that comment. Okay, any other thoughts? Okay. Sorry for going a little bit longer than we had anticipated, but thank you for your patience, and thank you all for participating, and thank you to our guest critic, Robert Cohen, for his participation. And look forward to WebEx 2, which we should try to schedule sooner rather than later, because it's occurring at a very busy time of year, and as we've seen, it's not so easy to schedule these things sometimes, but I think it's been a great success. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. So I think I recorded this. It says recording.
Oh, okay.
Can you show me what one does to get the recording so I can give it to another student?
Okay, let me stop it first.